Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines this hour. A fire rips through a crowded bar in Crans-Montana, Switzerland, killing around 40 people and injuring more than 100. Swiss officials describe it as one of the country's worst tragedies as investigators work to determine the cause. Several people are killed as large economic protests in Iran turn violent, with clashes reported in multiple provinces. State media says 3 protesters are killed and 17 injured in an attack on a police station in Lorestan. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro says he's open to negotiating with the United States on combating drug trafficking. He strikes a more conciliatory tone towards Washington, even as he remains silent on reports of a recent CIA-led strike. Flights from Aden International Airport are suspended amid growing tensions between the STC separatists and Yemen's Saudi-backed government. Authorities say operations are halted as the power struggle escalates, and it is unclear when services will resume. Democrat Zoran Mamdani is sworn in as New York City mayor, vowing to push an agenda focused on making the city more affordable for working people. His left-wing victory, won last November, is seen as politically significant ahead of this year's US midterm elections. China says President Xi will host South Korean President Lee Jae-myung from Sunday, signaling a push to strengthen ties. It is their second meeting in 2 months, with Beijing emphasizing economic cooperation and tourism amid regional strains. Taiwan President Lai Ching-te says the island is determined to defend its sovereignty and boost defense as China steps up military pressure. He says the world is watching Taiwan's resolve after Beijing fired rockets towards the island during drills. Drug companies plan to raise US prices on at least 350 medications, including COVID, RSV and shingles vaccines, plus the cancer drug Aidarus. The median increase is around 4% as planned hikes exceed last year despite government pressure for cuts. We start with in the Indo-Pacific, and the United States has criticized China's recent military drills around Taiwan, calling them unnecessary and urging Beijing to end its pressure on the self-ruled island. State Department spokesman Tommy Pigott said China's military launches, fighter jet deployments and naval maneuvers increased tensions unnecessarily and called for restraint and meaningful dialogue. The drills, which took place on Monday and Tuesday, simulated a blockade of Taiwan's main ports, prompting Taipei to condemn the exercises as highly provocative. The move comes amid already heightened regional tensions, with the US warning that continued military escalation could destabilize the Taiwan Strait and the wider Indo-Pacific. Joining us now is Dr. Asta Chadha, an Associate Professor of International Relations. She joins us live from Ritsumeikan University in Kyoto, Japan. Thank you, as always. It is a pleasure, Dr. Chadha, to have you here on the broadcast. These exercises included simulations of blockading Taiwan's ports. How credible is a blockade threat in a real conflict, especially in terms between Taiwan and China?
Well, wishing you greetings for the new year, and thanks for having me today. I mean, they are quite credible in the sense that, we need to look at how these military drills are framed by Beijing. And they are calling them both a punishment for Taiwan's pro-independence forces, and also it seems to be a warning or a signaling, in the wider Indo-Pacific, specifically to the allies or the partners of Taiwan, to say that China would not accept any external interference into an internal or domestic matter. So U.S. response is quite, I would say it's quite measured, but also very much in line with how they have responded in the past, which is, they've acknowledged that China has over the years developed, very credible capabilities when it comes to cutting off Taiwan from the world, or preventing, other nations from being able to interfere or aid Taiwan in any way. The US also acknowledges that China does hold a substantial, let's say, influence in terms of disruption of trade, or disrupting the global supply chains or shipping routes close to Taiwan Straits. And also the fact that these drills were conducted with a very specific strategic aim. There seems to be, a possibility always of miscalculation, wherein, this time the live fires were conducted in very close proximity of Taiwan, probably among the very few that have happened in the past in that close proximity. This significantly increases the risk of any sort of accidental kinetic conflict. So US response acknowledges China's capability, and also the fact that the Indo-Pacific powers need to take cognizance of the situation, because this is clearly a provocation.
Yeah, indeed, and of course the US not only condemned these drills, Dr. Chadha, but recently, of course, approved an $11 billion arms sale to the island of Taiwan, its largest ever. How do these drills interact with US defense commitments under the Taiwan Relations Act?
I mean, once again, it's one thing what US might say, its words might be more towards managing an uncertainty in the Indo-Pacific, but consistently US has maintained its position with regard to China as a strategic rival, despite it being an important, important node in the wider global supply chains. And, not only that, I would like to extend it a little further. US response towards maritime security of its Indo-Pacific partners is not just limited to Taiwan per se. Because I mean, Taiwan, by targeting or aiding Taiwan, they are able to in some way deter Chinese aggression in South China Sea. But US is extending that sort of strategy to, let's say, Philippines, when it created this task force Philippines to strengthen its maritime security, or the fact that it is, on one hand, it's pushing its partners like Japan, Australia to increase their own defense budgets, but at the same time, US does seem to maintain or want to maintain that sort of influence in the Indo-Pacific, that sort of support to its partners in the Indo-Pacific. And that is very much in line with the US security strategy that it has maintained, at least in the past few decades, specifically ever since it recognized that China is, going to be a geopolitical rival for the United States. And hence you see that US 7th Fleet continues to do joint exercises, whether it's with Japan or, they're constantly trying to improve maritime domain awareness. And with that, this sort of commitment towards Taiwan's security, specifically this 40 billion defense plan, the idea is that the US should be able to commit to a certain extent, but because we are under Trump administration now, and we are currently seeing that President Trump would want these countries to also increase their own defense budget, we are seeing the move in Taiwan as well to build its own defenses. So it's no longer so that it no longer looks as completely dependent on the US or its partners, but develops its own defenses. And which is why you saw the Chinese aggression that we did in South China Sea or close to Taiwan Straits, because China clearly wants to signal that this kind of pro-independence forces in Taiwan would not be tolerated by China.
Indeed. Dr. Chadha, stay with us as we move on to our next story. And New York City Mayor Zoran Mamdani has sent a handwritten note to former Jawaharlal Nehru University student Umar Khalid, who is currently in Delhi's Tihar jail. In the letter, Mamdani expressed solidarity and recalled their previous interaction, writing, "We are all thinking of you." Mamdani, the first Muslim and Indian origin mayor of New York, handed the note to Khalid's parents during their visit to the US in December 2025. Khalid's father, Syed Qasim Rasool Ilyas, said the meeting included discussions about Khalid's prolonged incarceration and Mamdani's engagement with his letters from jail. Khalid, arrested in September 2020 under India's Unlawful Activities Act for alleged involvement in the February 2020 Delhi riots, has consistently denied the charges. He has, notably, been in jail without a trial for 5 years now. The note surfaced on social media, shared by Khalid's partner. The case has attracted international attention, with US lawmakers, including Congressman Jamie Raskin, raising concerns over Khalid's continued pre-trial detention. Dr. Chadha joins us once again to discuss this. India, of course, maintains that Khalid faces serious charges to the 2020 Delhi riots. However, he has now spent 5 years in jail without a trial under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. What does such a prolonged trial, pre-trial detention, say about due process and democratic norms in Delhi?
Well, I mean, when these 2020 riots happened, we need to go back and see the US, sort of connection there as well. Not for the riots per se, but, the kind of reaction and response of the Indian government, because it was around the time of President Trump's, when he was, in his first term, his visit to New Delhi, exactly at that time. So when these riots happened, there were several people who were arrested, and probably, because they were found to be either possibly linked to inciting violence or linked to in some way, orchestrating the kind of violence that happened. And Umar Khalid was one of those people who were at that point held responsible and were jailed or incarcerated, and they were pending trial. Nothing has happened so far. I mean, we continue to see that, the case has been pending. We don't see a clear judgment in that case. However, December also was around the time when, India's courts granted him a bail to attend his sister's wedding. And so, U.S. lawmakers or any sort of this media attention that this case is getting is very, very critical for a lot of reasons, right? Because we see once again President Trump back in the White House. We see the newly elected mayor Zoran Mamdani, who was sworn in on a very socialist democratic sort of agenda. Him trying to, in some way, bridge the gap or take up this case as, his show of international solidarity, or trying to show that, and it was again very, very well timed, because the question then arises, why now? Why is everyone in the US, on let's say, who do stand on the same ground with Mr. Mamdani, why are they expressing this solidarity 5 years later? Why not earlier, right? Because of all this handwritten note. And that is very, very curious, right? I don't see any Indian responses. It's also very unlikely that India is going to respond to this, at least at a national level, because that has been their previous policy. They don't usually respond to, people from the Congress, though they might respond very directly and very quickly to people from the administration per se. That's very, very unlikely that we're going to see that. However, we cannot rule out the fact that this is a very, 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 important development in the US politics, because the question then arises, why Mr. Mamdani had to kind of, pitch this as part of his political identity, as part of a global struggle that he's doing. And, the things that come to my mind are probably, he's trying to showcase that he understands the working class struggle in New York, and is trying to bridge somehow that struggle with the democratic struggles that are happening abroad. And the fact that, his base, or his political base, or the one that he closely identifies with, is, him being the first Muslim South Asian mayor who's elected in New York. He's trying to probably play in some way to that political clout or that base as well, when he pitches this idea of solidarity. And lastly, his approach to the Delhi riots, we don't see him talking much about the Delhi riots or the victims or people, who suffered, but we do see him trying to bring up this issue as that of a political prisoner, rather than those of people who are pending judgment. Yes.
Indeed. Dr. Chatter, as always, it is a pleasure to talk to you and have you on the broadcast. Thank you very much for joining us. We now move on and over to the Middle East, and Saudi Arabia has accused Yemen's powerful southern separatist leader of blocking a high-level Saudi delegation from landing in the port city of Aden, sharply escalating tensions within the country's fragile power structure. Saudi ambassador to Yemen, Mohammed al-Jaber, said Aidarus al-Zubaidi refused landing permission for a Saudi plane on January the 1st. He said the UAE-backed Southern Transitional Council leader also ordered the shutdown of air traffic at Aden International Airport. Flights were halted for hours, affecting civilians in areas outside Houthi control. Al-Jaber said Saudi Arabia has worked consistently to support peace, stability and the southern cause through political dialogue, not unilateral actions. He accused Zubaidi of making dangerous decisions, including military moves in Hadramaut and Al-Mahara, that he said harmed civilians. The ambassador said Saudi mediation efforts to de-escalate tensions were repeatedly rejected. He warned that shutting Aden airport undermines coordination and sets a dangerous precedent, while expressing hope that moderate voices within the Southern Transitional Council will prevail. Joining us now is Major General Dr. Rajan Kochar, an international relations expert, joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. Of course, always a pleasure. Saudi Arabia here said that Aidarus al-Zubaidi blocked its delegation from landing at Aden airport. How serious is this escalation in Yemen's already fractured power structure?
Thank you, Thomas. I think this escalation is stepping up in its magnitude, because right now it may not be that serious to warrant any major action from Saudi Arabia side. But at the same time, we have seen this Yemen, the way it has been structured in three parts. The northern part is with the Houthis, and then we had this anti-Houthi alliance. The Southern Transitional Council is in the south, and center of Yemen is the PLC, and it is actually recognized as the authorized government of Yemen, and it is dominated by Saudi Arabia. What Saudi Arabia actually wanted was that Saudi and UAE convergence should take place in bringing or in presenting a unified front to the Houthis. And basically, this is an anti-Houthi alliance kind of a thing. But what is happening is that Yemen, UAE is more interested in the port of Aden, and those maritime assets are there, which I think sways the trade factor also in favor of UAE. So UAE wanted to dominate this southern part of Yemen, and Southern Transitional Council, which is primarily the group which is controlling this particular portion of Yemen, it has the blessings of UAE. So that's why this action has taken place in not permitting Saudi Arabia vessels to come nearby and things like that. So I think delegation is also being blocked, and so many other related incidents are taking place in this area. So I think this is possibly this PLC is a very, very weak central authority. It has not been able to influence, and that is the reason that SLC is becoming stronger, and therefore they feel that having a weak central authority will not do in case they want to present a strong front to the Houthis. So a second larger actually context is that the strength of Saudi Arabia appears to be diminishing in the Gulf countries. It was supposedly the leader of the Gulf countries, and Yemen was always looking up to Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia is by far the strongest and the biggest country in this Middle East. So I think a declining leverage we are seeing of Saudis now. And in the larger perspective, I think there is a gradual shift of power balance also we are seeing in this region. And if you remember, Thomas, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia had entered into a defense alliance, and a kind of alliance. And why it was done was, it was primarily to show to the Gulf nations, other nations, that Saudi Arabia wields a stronger offensive power than them, so that it could dominate this region. Because we have seen in this GCC also and OIC also, Organization of Islamic Countries also, we have seen there is a tussle for leadership between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And Saudi Arabia, over a period of time, has emerged as the uh, is recognized leader. So I think this is a dent as far as I would feel in Saudi influence. And slowly we are seeing there is an erosion of relationship between the UAE and Saudi Arabia due to conflicting interests. And it is very evident in Yemen now, a confliction of interest. So this confliction of interest is going to actually help the Houthis now, because Houthis are a strong lot. They are united. There is a fracture now between the SLC and the PLC, and you can call it Saudi Arabia and UAE. And this is going to help the Houthis in consolidation of power in Yemen. As it is, Yemen is a fractured kind of a country where the central authority is weak. Though it has its own armed forces, those armed forces are not very strong, and the influence of a major portion being the southern part is to rest with the UAE. So I think this is a situation I would see developing now, and in times to come, though it may happen you very fast also, the deterioration of Saudi and the UAE relations, and Saudi. And my last point is that Saudi was always looking for an exit policy. Saudi was trying to establish that a consolidation of forces under a unified command
Yes.
should take place in this region, and it was looking to exit at a later stage. But I think UAE is not interested to exit, and nor is the SLC. So these are the divergence of interest in this region.
Yes, indeed. Dr. Kochar, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's always a pleasure to have you on the programme. We now move on, and Australia batsman Usman Khawaja has announced that he will retire from international cricket following this week's fifth Ashes test against England at the Sydney Cricket Ground. The 39-year-old made his test debut at the SCG in the final match of the 2010 to 11 Ashes series, and has since recorded 6,206 runs at an average of 43.39, including 16 centuries in 87 matches. Speaking at the ground, Khawaja said cricket has given him lifelong memories, friendships and lessons beyond the sport. The Pakistan-born batsman batted back from a back injury in the Ashes opener in Perth and was recalled for the third test after Steve Smith's vertigo, scoring 82 and 40 to help Australia secure the series win. He will play his final international match on Sunday at the SCG. Let's take a listen in.
I'm here to announce today that I'll be retiring from all international cricket after the SCG test match. I hope I've inspired many children along the way, particularly those who feel that they are different, those who feel that they don't belong, or those others tell that they will never make it. I felt all these things growing up and trying to be an Australian cricketer. But seeing is believing. And I'm here to tell you that you can do whatever you want. You just got to keep trying. Never let anyone convince you that you can't, because if they do convince you, then you never will. I'm a proud Muslim coloured boy from Pakistan who was told that he would never play for the Australian cricket team. Look at me now. And you can do the same.
Now we move on, and Starlink plans to lower satellite orbit to enhance safety. One of its satellites had a problem in space, creating some debris and losing contact at 418 kilometres altitude. Michael Nichols, SpaceX's vice president of Starlink engineering, said that Starlink will begin a reconfiguration of its satellite constellation by lowering all of its satellites orbiting It's around 550 kilometers to 480 kilometers over the course of 2026. The company is looking to increase space safety by lowering the satellite's orbit. The company claims that the satellite rapidly dropped 4 kilometers in altitude, indicating a possible onboard explosion. The number of spacecrafts in Earth's orbit has jumped sharply in recent years as countries race to deploy tens of thousands of satellites for internet constellations and other space-based services such as communication and Earth imagery. SpaceX, once famous for rockets, is now the world's biggest satellite operator, with nearly 10,000 Starlink satellites providing internet worldwide. Well, that's all that we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more international updates.